Well, really, if we don't do action now, there'll be irreversible damage caused by climate change. I think about net zero as, in three distinct decades. So the first decade is more of the same. So, the decarbonisation of the power generation sector. So that means replacing old, inefficient coal plants with renewable energy. And that means proving up battery technology to see if it can disrupt the gas system as well. The second decade is really about electrification of the transportation systems. So, obviously, with transport, that is the largest emitter of carbon today, so it's the biggest one that we need to tackle. The way that we do that is through investment in transmission and distribution and pulling the energy to these centrally located places so that we can allow charging stations to connect. That will require further investment in renewables and further investment in the transmission and distribution. And I think when people think about net zero, they think a lot about renewables, but we just don't get there if we don't connect all those renewables to the grid. The third decade, so kind of the 2040s, is really where we try and tackle those hard-to-abate sectors. So the reason that they're left to last is because they're blatantly the hardest thing to do. So what we need is to invest now so that those cost curves of things like hydrogen, sustainable aviation fuels and the like can see a reduction as to what we've seen in onshore wind, in solar and more recently in batteries. All of those things to reach net zero will require infrastructure investment. We can think about lots of different other ways that we can decarbonise, but without infrastructure, we just don't get there. Yeah, we engage one-on-one with companies. We've engaged collaboratively, through Climate Action 100 with companies. So we are really trying to tackle this from many different angles. Alliant Energy would be a good example. They're a regulated utility in Iowa and Wisconsin. Back in 2005, they had about 44% of their generation mix coming from coal. And only 5% from renewables. Now, as we've seen those cost curves come down for onshore wind and solar, Alliance really had to rethink about its resource planning because this is, the cheapest form of energy that they can use to deliver affordable clean energy to their consumers. So, when they were thinking about their generation planning, what we've seen is more wind and solar. And as investors, we've been, encouraging them to accelerate those plans and to get rid of these old inefficient coal plants. What's been really pleasing more recently is that they've committed to reducing their fossil fuel generation by 50% by 2030, eliminating coal by 2040, and an ambitious target to reach net zero by 2050. So now it's really on us to keep monitoring, tracking and engaging and making sure those targets are hit.
I'm going to take that one first. I think first thing to point out is that what we've seen through the last 12 months is actually executive management teams and boards have really been reaching out to us as investors to engage. I think our level of engagement has actually gone up over this period. What we've seen is that perhaps management teams, rather than simply going through and visiting cities, New York and Chicago and London, they've really thought about their investor base and the type of investors they need to engage with. And we've been pleasantly surprised by the input we've had from them. So our call volumes have gone up in terms of one-on-one opportunities to engage not just with the CEO and CFO, but other members of management as well. And then with the board, the advantage of video conferencing is that we've been able to directly engage with the chair of the board, remuneration committees, when we've done some engagement work with them. And that's been an advantage of this new world that we live in.
投资一定有风险，基金投资有赚有赔，申购前应详阅公开说明书与投资人须知。